If you
Yeah.
would feel comfortable, could you talk about how you kind of did that transition from the evangelical, I can never say that word, evangelical, to kind of being a witch and everything? Like, how did that happen for you?
Yeah, if you want me to talk about that, I sure will. It's a really crazy story, but I was, we were very much controlled in my youth, and we were out in the country. And when I say it's a cult, I mean that the pastor controlled everything. My parents put a for sale sign up one time. The pastor came and said it's not God's will. They pulled the sign up.
Mm.
They, you had to tithe a certain amount of money, and they would come out, and it was really crazy. So we really only listened to classical music and church hymns and things like that. And so what crazily enough, when I went to Bible college, which the one they wanted you to go to is in upstate South Carolina, Greenville. I won't say the name, but people
Mhm.
probably know where it is. That's the one they wanted you to go to. And I ended up going to a school closer to home. And I went to classes like hermeneutics, where I was taught to examine the Bible and figure out what the Bible was saying through Greek and Hebrew and context. Oh my God, context. And I started going home to my parents and saying, "Oh my God, Mama, this is not exactly what we were being taught. The Bible doesn't actually mean that. The Bible doesn't actually tell us that we have to wear culottes and long dresses, and women aren't supposed to speak, and we're the servants to the men." I said, "Mama, this is not what this is saying." And through that, oddly enough, of going to Bible college, I began to realize that what I had been kind of indoctrinated into wasn't actually the way of the world, and it wasn't actually even Christianity. It wasn't actually what the Bible was saying. And so from there, I ended up going overseas to teach a little while with a mission organization. And when I came back, I had just seen probably the worst of Christianity, unfortunately.
Mhm.
So when I came back, some things happened in my life. I had undergone abuse, actually abuse in the church itself, but
Mhm.
we were not allowed to speak about it, and just all this stuff like that. I wanted nothing to do with religion, with spirituality, with God. I cursed God out, and I just kind of just went my own way. And I began playing Dungeons and Dragons, which was absolutely demonic. I thought I was the edgiest person in the world, because my church, basically, that's opening up for the devil.
Mhm.
And so I was introduced to druids and mages and that sort of thing, and magic. And as I was doing research for my character, I began to run into sites about real magic and real druids. And so I began just following that trail and learning all the real stuff. So the church will say that playing D&D is the gateway to getting into demonic stuff, and I guess to them, yeah, it could be. Even though it's not demonic, it actually opened up my heart, and I thought of all the things that have happened to me. I've been very gifted my whole life with clairvoyance, and just a lot of the different spiritual gifts, and seeing spirits and having all these kind of supernatural experiences. And all this time I was told that I was either demon possessed or demons were after me, and that it was just something that I was sinful to have. And it turns out that I just have spiritual gifts. And so it took me up into my 30s to really accept every part of myself, including the scary, at some point, gifts. And just through my own research, for a long time, I practiced quietly. I didn't tell a lot of people. But I'm now a pagan minister, and I teach other people. I go, and just a couple of weeks ago, go clear houses of entities and things like that. So it's a huge difference. But when I started learning about true paganism and true spirituality, it was just like coming home to me. It was like this information had been in my soul all along, and I could shake free from this box that people had been trying to stuff me in so long. I didn't fit into it, and I tried so hard to please everyone, and I just didn't fit, and I never understood why. If I tried so hard, why couldn't I fit Why couldn't I be happy? Why couldn't I just have this spiritual experience without having a million rules to follow, and rules that they don't even tell you that if you break, you're in trouble. And it just was so freeing for me to be able to just walk my own path and have my own experience with my own body and my own gifts and nature.
Wow, that's an incredible story. And first of all, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I find it ironic, and I finally get to use this word correctly. I don't mean coincidentally. I find it ironic that going to a Bible study taught you to question your Christian upbringing. And I find that is for people like myself who tend to be pretty logical, pretty kind of black and white with some things. Not everything. I understand the world's full of colors, but black and white on the sense of what's in the Bible. There's certain period pieces of
Yeah.
it that speak very specifically, and then I hear a pastor or somebody else say something. I'm like, are you reading the same passage I'm reading? Because they didn't say that. It
Yeah,
certainly didn't make
exactly.
that leap into the thing you just said. And I've had conversations about that with other people because I think there is some realization that the way that people interpret the Bible is not monolithic, but also people aren't interpreting the Bible. They are claiming to be, and then let me be clear, I'm not specifically saying this about Christianity. I'm saying this about all religions. I just have the most familiarity
Hmm.
with Christianity as somebody who's raised Christian. Um,
Right.
but they start using their culture and then using their culture to try to find pieces in the Bible that relate to one another and then saying the Bible says it, right? And so you see that with a lot of the things.
Yeah.
Is it convenient that the things the Bible has a problem with, we also have a problem with in mainstream culture? You don't think that that's a coincidence? Do you think that Jesus was just really ahead of his time?
Right.
No, you're interpreting it in such a way because of what you already believe, and that's where you found out by looking at the real original text, like going outside of just what was translated into English and really getting into the nitty gritty of it and going, hey, this, this doesn't mean that. And you probably, and I imagine, I don't want to, put my thoughts into your head, but I imagine you thought like, oh, I wonder if my family knows this. You thought you were helping, you thought you were
Right.
telling them all this stuff, and you come back and you find out, oh, they were your family or whoever else may have already known this. They're just changing it to do what they want to do anyways. And so that's just a fascinating
Mm.
process to me because like it literally started with trying to be closer to the process that got you on your eventual path to where you are now. And that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Yeah, people when I tell them that it was going to Bible college that actually helped me learn that I was not taught the right Christian belief system. They're like, what in the world? How does that even work? But it's because I feel like that Bible college did its job well. And it's at least in that class,
Hmm.
we weren't taking a rule, for instance, not getting tattoos. We weren't taking this, you shouldn't get tattoos, and then trying to find one verse out of the entire Bible to back that up. We were taught you got to look at the culture of where it was written. You got to look at the context. Don't just pull one verse out, because you could do that. You could pick any book off my bookshelf right now, take one sentence out, and have a million different beliefs about it. But if you
Hmm.
read the whole paragraph or even the whole chapter, it might have been telling you how not to do something. You don't know. You got to look at more than just that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the big thing that I've always had an issue with when it comes to religious texts of any particular religion, because I think that again, this is a human thing, it's not a religion thing.
Right.
It's where I'm going to accentuate and talk 90% of the time about this one thing that it says while ignoring other things that it says. Now, my
Yeah.
favorite to go to example from the Christian Bible is that we talk about murder. Obviously, murder's bad. It's in the Ten Commandments. It's like pretty clear on murders, right? Then you start to go into things that are a little murkier, like tattoos. It's like, well, what about the part where it says don't
Yeah.
trim the edges of your beard? Well, what about the parts where it says don't
Right.
wear mixed fabrics? It's like, oh no, no, that's fine. Polyester is fine. Like we don't care about those
Yeah.
type of things. We just want to specifically pick out of these
Right.
other pieces. And I that's the problem excuse me, that's the part for me that caused the biggest problem is because I'm like, look, if you want to tell
Yeah.
me that you're following the Bible and that's your guide to life, I can get behind that. You're allowed to believe whatever you want to believe, and I will support you in your ability to do so. But when you start ignoring pieces of it because it's less convenient for you to do so, I will challenge that. That's a problem that I have because you're no longer backing your beliefs up by your religion. You're backing your beliefs up with specific pieces of your religion and ignoring your religion where it's not convenient for you to do so. And that's
Yeah.
where we start to cross into a lot of the political people who do this. You cross
Yeah.
into your personal people in your personal life who do this and everything. And that's where I have a trouble having those conversations, because all you're doing is exactly like you talked about the religious group that you were in did, is I'm picking the pieces that I want to believe and accentuating the ones I want to believe, and maybe even creating some of the ones I want to believe while ignoring things that aren't convenient for me and the way that I want to live my life.
Right. And I don't think it would even be that much of a problem if it wasn't pounded into your head that
Mm-hmm.
these scriptures, whatever religion it is, these scriptures are straight from God Himself.
Mm-hmm.
And every single piece, I mean, that's what we were taught, is it is entirely from God. Well, then follow everything.
Mm-hmm.
Either say, this is a man's version of how they perceive the world, and we're going to take what applies to us today, or say every single dot and uh, bit is from God, then follow it all or don't. You can't mix the two. You can't say it's all from God and eat pork. And even with the murder thing, I was a hospice volunteer. When I was becoming a minister, part of what I had to do was to do a project in the community, and I chose to be a hospice volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
One of the jobs I had to do with many of my clients was read the Bible to them. That's what they wanted. That's what they wanted in their last days, is the Bible being read to them. And I had to read the entire Bible every year of Bible college. So I'm very familiar with the Bible, but it had been many years since I've done that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually embarrassed by some of the things that I was reading to these people. And I would actually change some of the words, and would make comment. I would be reading Psalms, and David was so whiny about things, and I would say to the lady, and she was not very responsive, but her daughter had said, read this to her. I would say, I am so sorry that David is so whiny. I never realized how whiny he is, but we're going to keep reading. And then going in and just destroying entire towns down to the children, the men, the women, their livestock, everything, their pets.
Mm-hmm.
It was embarrassing to me. And I thought, I didn't even notice this back when I was a child. I didn't even notice how destructive. And how do you take that and you just kind of, okay, that doesn't matter, that part doesn't apply. But damn it, you better not have pants on. You better not speak up when you're in church, woman. Like, how do you put those pieces together? That was really difficult for me for a while.
And I think that for a lot of us, that is very difficult. And I think that's where you start to see people either buy more into what they're being told or start to question it and go out on their own paths. And sometimes those
Mm,
paths lead them to a different sect of the religion. Sometimes they
yeah,
lead them to potentially start their own version of it. But then sometimes it leads them away from it. And I
yeah,
think that's where a lot of people, that's where a lot of the religious leaders, I'll say, that's where they should do a lot of soul searching on that, because
yeah.
you have to accept at some point that two things. One, there's no such thing as God's word. When I say that, let me be clear. By every religious definition that I've ever seen, God uses man to translate his word.
Right.
You also accept that all men, and I mean all people, are sinners. So there's a high probability some of them lied about some of it, right? So there's, you start with that basic concept, and but then also you start to say, hey, what am I saying that is ignoring other parts of my religious text? What am I
Mm,
saying that is accentuating parts of the religious text? You know what I mean?
mm,
And then start to be
yeah,
honest with yourself about what that means, and stop pretending that you know what your God wants. You're
yeah,
interpreting it like everyone else is, and you may feel more solidly that you know that, but it doesn't mean that you get to just tell people that it's law. You know, and I think that's the part of the problem
yeah,
is that we ignore the human element of some of these activities, including, again, and I'm talking from a very individualized perspective, in the sense that if Brandon was a religious leader, Brandon is ignoring these flaws that Brandon has, and he's ignoring all these other things, right? And I think that's one of the things that
yeah,
we need to be more honest about, and hopefully we can get to a better place with a lot of these things, because at the end of the day, if you were able to do that, you're also able to potentially not cause a lot of these religious wars that we've had and continue to have, you know, around the world. And I really hope that for that for the future, because the foundation of America was built on the concept, so they say. Obviously, there's a lot of the same thing concepts we're talking about right now, where they're like, "Oh, all men are created equal, except the ones that aren't allowed to do anything because we own them." Right? So there's a lot of this stuff that we see across multiple
Right,
human
right.
experiences. So I'm saying, but anyways, the
Yeah.
American foundation was supposed to be on freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and those type of things. And if you have freedom of religion, that means I have to value the fact that other people have another religion and not hate them for it, and not act as if they're all liars except for mine, right? You just have to accept that people believe different things, and we just have to be very honest in
Yeah.
our own beliefs, I think. Thanks for checking out Starting Nowhere. Come find us on Facebook so you can comment on this and other clips and episodes of Starting Nowhere.